We're now beginning a new series of devotions on the minor prophets. This is 12 books in the Old Testament that doesn't get a lot of airtime. The term minor prophets doesn't help. Suggests they're not as important as some other books. There's 12 of them, and the names are hard to remember and sort of complicated, and they deal with some pretty heavy and gloomy topics. There's just a number of reasons why a lot of people don't spend a lot of time in the minor prophets, which I think is a big mistake because I think they are very relevant, sort of ripped from the headlines kind of relevant. So just want to set it up today, sort of give you the flyover of this genre of books. So there's a fair bit of diversity within the 12 minor prophets. These books were written for people who had turned their backs on God. And so there's sort of two big periods in which they're written, the 8th century BC and the 6th century BC. Different issues. They're written to different people. So you've got some being written directed at the 10 northern tribes, warning them that they're going to fall. If they don't turn, if they don't get right with God, they're going to fall and they're going to be overrun, which they will be in 722 BC by the Assyrians. You have some of these books that are written to the southern two tribes. So these are the tribes that survive. It looked like they would also be overrun by the Assyrians, but in God's providence they're not. But then in 586 BC, they're going to fall to the Babylonians. The northern 10 tribes that fall to the Assyrians, they sort of are never heard from again. They get assimilated or just wiped out by the Assyrians. The southern two tribes are pulled into Babylonian captivity. That's 70 years in exile. Everything is decimated. But then at the end of that 70 years, a remnant will return back to Israel, back to Jerusalem, and rebuild the wall. That's the book of Nehemiah. And you got some books that are happening there, Habakkuk and Esther and other things. So the books are helpful if, by chance, you have ever turned your back on God. And they're significant. So there's major prophets. The major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, are called major because they're long. The minor prophets are called minor because they're very short. And all 12 of them at one point used to fit on one scroll. So one, they'd write this on parchment or on animal skin, and these things would be rolled up. And you could get all 12 of the books. If you unfolded one scroll, that would have all 12 of the minor prophets. And so they're grouped together. So the last thing to note, just as you think about prophets, so I've said they're minor, they're smaller, grouped together, although there's a lot of diversity in terms of who they're directed to. The other thing is just to understand about prophecy. So a lot of people think of prophecy being prediction of the future, foretelling the future. And that's true. Some of it is that. But most of it is more what we call forthtelling, just announcing God's dictates, just stating God says, look, you need to do this. If you don't do this, you're going to fall. And again, I repeatedly argue that a lot of times God's prophetic voice is not saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you and you're going to suffer. It's just saying, you're headed down a really stupid path. Sin is ultimately just stupid behavior. It's self-destructive behavior. We just don't have a heart that sees it that way, and we don't have the wisdom to sort of see how these things are going to play out over time. So we're going to be looking at a number of prophets, and we're dealing with big questions, the minor prophets raise the biggest questions. Can I trust God? Can I trust God's promises? What's God's relationship to evil when he announces he's going to send the Babylonians or the Assyrians to judge us? These are horrible people. How could God be in partnership with them? So there's a lot here. This is an important series, and I hope that you will be reading these books. They're relatively short and quick to read. Have a good day.